Well, folks, this is House Corrections and Institutions Committee. It's our 4 o'clock meeting or close to 4 o'clock. This is Wednesday, January 29th. We had a bill that's been sent to our committee, House Bill 32. We're spending time today with the lead sponsor, one of the lead sponsors of the bill, Representative Eric McGuire from Rutland. This is our first look at the bill. So Eric, welcome. And I know you're in the hot seat. You've been in the hot seat in this committee before as a member, but you're actually sitting in the hot seat this time, testifying. So welcome.
Thank you very much. For the record, yes, Representative Eric McGuire, Rutland City. And I first want to start by expressing my gratitude and appreciation to you, Madam Chair, for allowing me the opportunity to come and introduce H72 along with the co-sponsor being Representative Troy Hendrick from Burlington. Just to reflect quickly, I want to touch on a couple of historical narratives. You're well aware, Madam Chair, that as you may have scrolled through this bill, there's a lot of repetition in regards to Act 176 from 2018. So the premise behind the development of this bill quickly was to help assist and guide and get those measurements back into place as outlined in 2018. I need to commend the Committee of Jurisdiction at the time, which was your committee, in the development of that language. It really set a tone for other states to establish their MAT programs within their correctional facilities. And there are some things that are really beginning to come together that I'm hearing on the ground level in regards to improvements within how the MAT program, Medicaid Assisted Treatment Program, is being disseminated within facilities. But I believe, putting this together will help emphasize and help enhance, make the program better, do better, and more importantly, put some better reentry strategies into place to where there is a seamless transition of an individual inside the facility on MAT and being seamlessly transitioned to a provider. So there is many, many nuances through here, but I'm really going to stay focused on three main pieces. One, the in-house case plan individualized for the individual participating in MAT in the facility, the reentry piece as a transition to the provider in the community, and then the third piece being the reporting requirements. I think it's also going to be important if the committee chooses to pursue any more with this bill, that there is also language put in there that implements a comprehensive audit of the Vermont DOC MAT program from its inception. I don't believe that's ever been conducted, and that report should be conducted by an independent entity. And I think that will produce a lot of what's working, what's not working. Most states that do operate an MAT at this time in the correctional facilities have done those reports. I have not had an opportunity to scan every one of them. I have read a few, and it has shown a significant reduction in overdose fatalities upon exiting. But a lot of those reports also show the effectiveness of the attachment of cognitive behavioral therapy or ISAP programs, IOPs in the program conducted by outsourced by providers within the community. Am I moving too fast? Okay. So just a quick scan on over the main subject statement of purpose of the bill. Introduced bill proposes to require the Department of Corrections to enter into memorandums of understanding with opioid treatment programs nearest each correctional facility in the state for the provision of opioid use disorder services, including medication for opioid use disorder. The bill also authorizes the Department of Corrections to enter into the memorandums of understanding with office-based treatment providers within reasonable proximity to a correctional facility in the state for provisions of opioid use disorder services, including medication for opioid use disorders. Touching on a couple of the key points. one, the mandatory MOUs, memorandum of understandings with treatment providers. DOC will probably claim that there is already memorandums of understanding, claim already the memorandum understanding or the bill mandates formal ones. And what we say by that formal one is a connection locally. So for the sake of just an example, I'm going to use Marble Valley Regional Correctional Facility. Within a proximity of that facility, there's roughly 6 providers that provide medicated assisted treatment for people within the community. So the idea would be to establish an MOU with one of those providers with the Department of Corrections, as well as possibly the Department of Health, in which they would be responsible as a conduit to be notified, hey, this person is being released. We want to make sure we have a seamless transition, and we're notifying you based upon the MOU of your role and responsibility to assist with that seamless transition to that provider. The second piece being the reentry plans, which are built into the medicated opioid use disorder support. This legislation requires individualized reentry plans that go beyond what DOC may be currently doing. Separate individualized service plan in regards to that reentry navigation process. And this plan would ensure, as was documented in or passed in legislation last session, the 7-day medication supply upon release. That's going to be vitally important because there are individuals that get released on a Friday afternoon because we may be hearing some levels of contradiction. Well, wait a minute, Eric, if we have this seamless transition out of the facility over to a provider, then what would be the purpose or the premise behind that 7-day supply? It would be on those cases in which the provider is not available until Monday morning. You may have a rapid release on a Friday, late Friday afternoon. Therefore, you need to be able to put that bridge into place until they can be seamlessly transitioned that over to the provider. So it's vitally important that piece remains in there. Then following up with scheduled followed up care with community providers. And also, it also implements in regards to the coordination of housing, employment, and social services. Now, at this time, I believe the committee today took testimony from a couple of Turning Point centers that are providing recovery coaching within the facility. And DOC is doing a wonderful job of partnering with them in regards to some of these other measures. And it lines up nicely with part of that coordinated care in the facility and the utilization and recovery coaches. So it's great to see some of that stuff come together. The third piece to this is at some point, now there's only Rhode Island, don't quote me on this, I'd have to go back to look, but I believe Rhode Island is currently the only system at this time that has transitioned from what we are as an interim maintenance treatment provider in the facility. They have transitioned to full regulation as a treatment provider, as a spoke, not a hub. You can't hub a facility. We can't have people from the community banging on the door of our facilities asking if we can, participate in our medicated assisted treatment program. So you are looked at as a spoke. Now, with this bill, it begins to get that transition moving forward. And please help me with the Medicaid exemption number that's going to allow. So when that is enacted, that's where we will start seeing significant unilateral and collateral costs upon this burden right now, because that will help with that transition and also be able to provide the funding to back this up. Currently at this time, facilities that are utilizing this method have shown a significant cost reduction in regards to, and I will forward all of the notes and all of the information I'm taking on over to you. With that transition, when you expand from an interim maintenance treatment facility, an IM, to an opioid treatment program, an OTP, there are costs associated with the expansion, the initial certification, the long-term staffing changes, and increased regulations. But over time, the benefits are you have access to more robust treatment. The standardized treatment is no longer limited to 120 days. It is fully on. And then you have also your on-site possible methadone if that's something that they choose to explore. And over time, two states, one, Missouri and Kentucky, have reported back that their return on investment of $1.03 to $3.76 for every dollar spent. So they're getting a $3 return for this investment, as in Kentucky is getting about a $4 return for every dollar spent. So there's a significant unilateral and collateral cost upon the system. And we all know taxpayers love tax cost reduction. Fourth piece, transparency and accountability through reporting. It requires DOC to submit annual reports to the legislation on recidivism rates among inmates receiving medication for opioid use disorders, cost savings from reduced recidivism and healthcare expenditures, and of course, health and social outcomes post-release. But we'll leave that up to them as the experts to decide how they want to go about their quantitative data and what they believe that they need to be reported back. But we should be getting stronger reports than really what we're receiving. We're really not receiving much information. You're losing the individual once released. Do we know that are they remaining engaged with a community provider? Are they continuing, whether it's IOP or any other things that are helping them overcome and stay participatory in their requirements? So it's important that we follow those numbers. And that's why I relate back to it'll be vitally important if we could get a comprehensive audit conducted from inception to maybe 2024 to help identify what some of those dynamic as well as static numbers could look like. Finally, the loophole closures, uniform screening and continuity. This ensures all inmates, regardless of facility or admission date, are screened for opioid use disorder and receive uninterrupted medication for opioid use disorder if prescribed prior to incarceration. We do know this goes on if somebody does enter into a facility, whether they are a detainee or a sentenced individual, that they remain on their medication as outlined in the within their own plan. What doesn't go on, though, is the other cognitive measures that should be put into place that really shadows what will go on in the community, i.e. mandatory participation, and whether they just choose to bring back ISAP, the intensive substance abuse program, or utilize the MODs with a community provider to implement intensive outpatient treatment. That way, fidelity is remained in place, and when they transition, some things that they are responsible for completing are still in place at this time, and I cannot confirm it, but I don't believe there's any type of behavioral cognitive therapy going on or meeting with any individual counsel. In regards, it seems like you take your medication and you go upon your way. I believe this bill helps tighten that up by putting those MOU into place. And again, these are cost savings, because if we're utilizing the MOU with the providers are the ones that are in there, providing those very effective programs. Another loophole closure clarifies that medication for opioid use cannot be discontinued without a medically justified reason documented by a licensed provider. Also guarantees release planning. We've gone down this path for how many years? Reentry support is a key to somebody's success. And reentry begins as soon as that individual enters into the facility. It doesn't begin a year before release, 6 months before release, or one of the greatest, I can't even say greatest, but a call I received was about 6 years ago from a case manager in Newport, and he says, Eric, do you got any space available at Sanctuary House? I said, no, you know how the process works, this and that. He go, well, we gotta release this individual, and they gave me the name and gives me a little bit of background, and he's getting released after 15 years in Newport. So let me get this straight. The best we could do for an individual that we had 15 years was, please don't take a left because that's Canada. I don't mean to be cynical, but that's something that really needs to be addressed. We should be putting together comprehensive reentry plans based upon that individual's needs, not 6 months and not 2 days before we leave, immediate entry in the facility. And that closes up these significant loopholes, and more importantly, gets that community integration upon release seamlessly in place. That was a lot.
That was a lot. So you were,
Wow,
That was impressive though, wasn't it? Not just,
I mean, you know,
we were very impressed.
have you worked with DOC on any part of this?
we have not, no.
No. Questions? Sean?
why didn't you work with DOC on it?
We had developed this, and we were speaking over the time and felt that we wanted to submit the bill and see where we would go within this committee, and then engage, if you choose to engage DOC within that.
Mhm.
We wanted to leave that up to your discretion.
And to springboard off of that, I think DOC would probably tell us, correctly, right, this is a valid point, that they've really taken some very deliberate steps in creating a system that looks like this. And again, it's based on the previous act. And I agree, and I will say on record, I had a different feeling coming out of our first introduction to the medical staff that are in place now than I have had over the past 2 years. What we can't guarantee is, right, culture change happens over a long period of time, right? And we can't guarantee that current DOC administration is going to remain in place. We can't guarantee that WellPath is going to be the continued contract. This codifies a lot of that. This makes sure that a lot of the things that we're starting to see that are incredibly positive are punctuated and reinforced through code, which is kind of where we're going with this. This is not a critique of where we are right now as much as it is, let's make sure that all the good things we're starting to see land in statute. And to a point that Eric made during his presentation about the testimony we heard today from Turning Point, as I was listening to that testimony, I drew like an immediate analogy to the conversations we've been having with Kids Apart, how the success of Kids Apart is apparent in the women's facility, and how it makes sense to expand that to all parents, whether or not they identify as men or women, which is why I'm so committed to seeing that through. This is very similar. The partnership that we have developed with Turning Point is clearly, as we heard from today's testimony, doing amazing things. Let's solidify that. Let's make that statute. Let's make sure that those partnerships that create a much more broader system of support around just an injection or just a pill are there for our incarcerated Vermonters who are, about to leave land. We want this kind of law will, I'm convinced, decrease recidivism.
May I make a thought? And I wholeheartedly, we were full in agreement of this. The fact of the matter too is that the correctional system right now, or people heading on back, they're being asked to respond to the opioid epidemic. More people are ending up in the facilities that have, opioid use disorders. So why shouldn't we make sure we're putting in the best methods and the best practices that are being seen within the community, within providers, and utilize them within the facilities? Because over time, you're going to get a greater return for that investment. Recidivism will decrease. the overdoses will decrease. Not to say that there's very little information on out there, but obviously people that have been participating in the facility, their chances of overdose upon release is significantly lower. But we should be implementing the best reentry and the best practices that are also going on in the community. That way we are getting the better rate of return and giving them the best opportunity to succeed.
Mary and I can.
When I signed on to the bill, and I'm very much in favor of this and the steps going forward and bringing, folks out of prison and into the community. Have you looked or analyzed the costs that go along with this? Because obviously there's probably going to have to be, as it grows in the community, an expansion of services. If we're having more folks having those. So have you looked into any of that at this point or not really?
I have not at this point, no.
It's a rookie question. I didn't understand the implication after 16 years of being incarcerated, they might take a left-hand turn and go to Canada. Forgive me.
Because the Newport facility is what? The
Right.
backyard's almost in
So-
Canada. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm not understanding the implication is because they've got availability up there or.
Oh, no. It was kind of it was a joke or in
No,
regard.
I know it's
Yeah.
a joke, but I missed the point. And I,
Because no reentry plan was established for this individual that spent 15 years under the custody and care of the system. So the pun was kind of like, well, here's our reentry plan for you. Don't take a left because that's Canada. There was no comprehensive reentry plan established. Yeah.
so let me ask a follow-up then, and this is a pet peeve, forgive me, but after 16 years of being incarcerated, is there not an emphasis to be clean by the time you get out after 16 years?
I can't answer what the emphasis would be, but I can answer in regards to working in the field, working with individuals that do have substance use disorder and operating a transitional house for individuals coming out of incarceration. I do know this is that every path that the individual utilizes is at their discretion. There are some individuals that choose a path of recovery through this route. There's others that choose a path through this route. And there's others that may choose to say, you know something, I'm doing this cold turkey and I'm just going to quit. I believe it's vitally important that we support the individual's path to their programming, a path to their recovery, and to not engage or maybe express, well, this is the only path that you must take. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
I think it does, which promotes a follow-up then. I don't think anyone wants to be chained to drugs. It's based on bad decisions.
Some.
So why would we facilitate continued bad decisions rather than helping them get off of the drugs, which is expensive for DOC and then, in my opinion, not good for them as a person. And this is, I like what you've got here, so
Mhm.
I should probably shut up.
No.
But that's where my questions are coming from.
Yeah, I'll, Sebastian, we're speaking about though, utilizing medication for their opioid use disorder. So it'd be the same as, I certainly don't compare and contrast. I read a lot of literature. I follow a lot of data. I believe it's vitally important that we utilize the models as outlined by our national regulatory agencies and never lean upon our own understanding. But even in regards to that, we always leave it up to the individual to make that choice on if they want to continue to engage medication for their opioid use disorder or choose not to engage that. It shouldn't be left up to the decision of the provider or any other individual.
And I just want to, I want to put out there a reframing of how we got here that isn't always necessarily about bad choices. One of the reasons this state receives money from the opioid settlement is because Purdue Pharma knowingly convinced a nationwide network of doctors to prescribe an opioid that they knew was highly addictive. right? That created a landscape where the opioid pandemic began. And then as folks are told, no, you can't have a prescription anymore, right? They turn to heroin, which has turned to fentanyl, which has turned to xylazine. So this is a matter of health. This is addiction. This is and this is best practices to treating a health pandemic is through medication. And I think we do have to start getting comfortable with the fact that, to Eric's point, there are, right, this is going to be like insulin for some people. This is going to be a hypertension medication for some people, right? The way that we manage an opioid use disorder that was manufactured by Big Pharma is going to involve some people, not all people, a lifelong use of medicated assistance with that disorder.
For
They
some
can
people, I
function.
understand.
Yeah.
But if the general emphasis is to just have everybody medicated forever, that's very different, hoping that majority become clean and have a productive life without it, which is better for everybody, in my opinion. And that's why I asked the question.
Yeah,
If I might, I mean, a couple things, like, well, Troy had mentioned opioids, in pharma, true. And, some of it is choice, but some of it is also like, just to say you and I, whatever, you could take Oxy and get addicted. And I can take Oxy, which I have
Get sick.
a lot, and have no problem. So it's not always a choice. So everybody's body will react differently. And if you're one of those people who have the reaction that's different than mine, that's not necessarily, once it happens, it's not a choice. It's hard to get out of. But also, like, the ideal is that maybe once you start and you go down this road, that you can cold turkey or you can wean off and be great. But the reality isn't necessarily the ideal. And we have to prepare people for the reality. And it is much better to have safety nets around people rather than setting them out there and say, boy, I hope they do the ideal.
Yeah.
It just doesn't
No,
work.
I agree. That's where I like,
Yeah.
this is good. But depending on what you shoot for, you get what you get. If you're not shooting for,
Sometimes there's a lot more intricate.
that's good.
Very individualized.
I
exactly.
mean, if
Very
you plan to build a
individualized.
house, you can build a house, but there's certain things that don't really work that way, that chemical balances and other certain.
And also with this, Bill, if I may, it puts a lot of emphasis to what makes an MAT program successful are the wraparound cognitive supportive programs in place and the utilization of the assessment tools of effectiveness. Then the seamless transition to the community provider. That's it. That's what also assists with this, is puts the emphasis on this, because that's correct. Just having somebody take a medication, but not giving them the other resources to operate in the community, that ends up turning into an injustice. And I believe we have an obligation to make sure that we're providing the best opportunity for transition, whether we agree or disagree. We have an obligation to provide for those better transitions.
And also to the public.
It's public safety.
And we do, yep, the public safety, cost reductions, a multitude of things really wrap around with this. But then the idea is, can we run it effectively? Can we run it as it's outlined? And I believe that this system of corrections has that ability. I believe they have that ability. And the few points of change and culture change, yeah, those are hard. You've been dealing with them for how long now? Yep. So, as to use just another quick analogy, sometimes when it's 4th and goal and there's no time on the clock, don't run audibles, run the play. And then learn if you get in. If you get stopped, what did you learn from it? If you get in, then obviously something's running right. That's for your football fans.
Catch it.
We got it.
Thank you.
So who drafted this? Was it Ben?
No, it was
Katie.
Katie.
It was Katie?
Mhm.
So we'll have a committee discussion and just see if folks are interested in setting up more time. Suggesting,
Dynamic duo is back together.
I know, and the lights are shining off their heads.
If you-
Hey, I had three of them. I had Wayne sitting down there.
Madam Chair,
Sunglasses.
would it be all right if I make one more comment before I would like to recommend that if the committee does choose to pursue this any further, I would recommend taking testimony from hub and spoke providers.
Mhm.
That way you get a better note of that. And that's really the main thing to take a peek at, because do they have the capacity and the infrastructure to possibly take on this endeavor? I believe so. I did speak to a couple of providers that would, that have the ability to do that, but I would recommend that.
Great.
Thank you.
One more question.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know if the pharmaceutical companies that have created the opioid opportunities are also the ones that are developing the Suboxones and the alternative?
I can't answer that, but I do know this. I've read literature that some doctors have expressed to put it right next to the aspirin.
Purdue is not, Purdue's not.
So it's,
Which is where the setup.
Yeah, I understand that.
but in regards to what you answered, I can't answer that. Yeah, I don't have that information or have the expertise and knowledge to address that. I appreciate the question.
Great, thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good to have you back.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. You see.
Pleasure to be back.
See,
I mean-
I could have sat there.
So before we sign off, I'd just like to get a feel from committee members. Is this something that the committee would wish to take a little bit more testimony on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Sure. We'll see what, the key, I would like the first person to come in would be Katie McLean to walk us through the bill and see if she would be available next week at some point. And with the walkthrough of the bill, we'd need DOC in the room for sure. That. But the first thing we need is a walkthrough for the bill. Go from there. So let's finish on YouTube and we're back here tomorrow at 9.